Ok,
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Estamos empezando este Seminario Latinoamericano de Comunicación y Cooperación Académica y Científica, agradeciéndoles a los invitados y invitadas que están en este primer panel. La idea es dedicar este día 3 de noviembre de 2025 a discusiones relacionadas a más cooperación académica local, nacional, internacional y global en el campo de la comunicación. Y nuestro evento está basado en 4 paneles con personas que han desarrollado acciones dedicadas a la cooperación, especialmente en este primer panel a partir de las asociaciones que actúan en la comunicación con muchas actividades, de entre ellas eventos, publicaciones. Esta acción resulta de una alianza entre ALAIC, la Asociación Latinoamericana de Investigadores de la Comunicación, la Asociación Chilena de Investigadores e Investigadores en Comunicación, INCOM Chile, la Sociedad Brasileña de Estudios Interdisciplinares de la Comunicación, INTERCOM, la Asociación Colombiana de Investigadores de Comunicación, ASICOM, la Asociación Boliviana de Investigadores de la Comunicación, ABOIC, la Asociación Mexicana de Investigadores de la Comunicación, AMIC, la Federación Argentina de Carreras de Comunicación Social, FADECOS, la Federación de las Asociaciones Científicas y Académicas de Comunicación brasileña, SOCICOM, y la Federación Latinoamericana de Facultades de Comunicación Social, FELAFAX, y tiene apoyo de la Cátedra UNESCO Comunicar. Bueno, tenemos acá algunos invitados y invitadas que van a hablar por más o menos 6 a 8 minutos y la idea es que después de las presentaciones organicemos un resumen en inglés o español para posibilitar más comunicación. Antes de pasar la palabra para mi querido Laureano Checa de Incom Chile, creo que podríamos hacer unos segundos de silencio en homenaje a Armand Matelar. In honor of Armand Matelar, we will um, keep 10 seconds, think about the production of this important colleague that passed away last Friday. Entonces, todo nuestro reconocimiento a Armand Matelar y seguramente después tendremos ocasión para hacer eventos y actividades sobre la importancia de su trayectoria. Y ahora entonces escucharemos a Laureano Checa. Creo que estás en condiciones, amigo, de hacer las bienvenidas y tu presentación. Muchas gracias por la alianza, Laureano.
Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Muchísimas gracias por todas las gestiones y todo el esfuerzo realizado para poder encontrarnos, que muchas veces nos cuesta bastante y en este momento hemos cruzado todos los usos horarios posibles como para poder tener voces de todo el planeta en materia de nuestra investigación. Este campo que es relativamente joven en muchos de los países que nos van a estar mirando y donde las asociaciones han sido, como es en el caso de Chile, fundamentales para poder apalancar esta investigación, para poder contactar a los y las investigadoras en la materia. Y desde esta perspectiva siempre se agradece este tipo de instancias. Nosotros estamos esta semana en el marco de nuestro congreso, hemos incorporado esta instancia virtual como una preconferencia de nuestro congreso, por lo que esperamos que también sea de mucha utilidad para las personas que están haciendo la investigación tanto en Chile como en el resto del planeta. Nosotros en INCOM somos una asociación que se formó justamente para poder tener este punto de contacto tanto al interior de Chile como hacia afuera. Uno de los principales temas era justamente el poder contactarnos con ALAIC, ser parte de ALAIC desde un capítulo chileno, cosa que viene sucediendo desde el año 2011 y también el poder generar un espacio de diálogo permanente para la difusión y la discusión en torno a la comunicación, para la difusión de nuestras investigaciones a nivel local. Ya este es el 11º congreso que estamos realizando en estos 14 años de existencia, y podemos decir con bastante orgullo que es el espacio donde se encuentra la investigación en Chile, con muchas veces con participación de otros países, particularmente, por ejemplo, en la pandemia, donde nos visitaron muchísimas personas de todo el mundo. Para efectos de la organización de nuestro trabajo, lo que ha sido fundamental han sido la creación de grupos temáticos. Nosotros tenemos en este momento 4 grupos temáticos activos, que cada uno aborda distintas materias, y que congrega a investigadoras e investigadores de o sea, de esas líneas de investigación en comunicación. Y este año en particular, como directiva, propusimos a la Asamblea, bueno, en 2024 propusimos a la Asamblea la creación de pequeños fondos que nos permitieron, en el fondo, eh, motivar, incentivar reuniones dentro de los propios grupos temáticos, y estamos bastante contentos con el resultado de aquello. Parte de eso justamente son las preconferencias que se están organizando en el contexto de nuestro Congreso. Sí sentimos la necesidad de tener un mayor contacto con las asociaciones del resto del mundo. Particularmente eso fue el centro del diálogo que retomamos, o que estamos manteniendo con ALAIC, y desde esa perspectiva estamos, insisto, muy contentos de poder tener la oportunidad de compartir con ustedes respecto de sus experiencias. Así que muchísimas gracias por el tiempo dedicado, y puedo decir sin ambajes de que venimos en gran parte a aprender de lo que nos van a presentar.
Gracias, Laureano. Laureano points out the importance of the association with 15 years of history and 11 in this week conference organized by INCOM Chile, and the importance of this cooperation involved the association from Chile and the other associations in Latin America, especially ALAIC. And INCOM Chile right now has 4 working groups with activities, continuous activities, and with this, it's desire to be in dialogue, especially learning about the experience in this seminar. A continuación tenemos Dani Monge, nuestra vicepresidenta de ALAIC. Gracias, Dani, por todo, no solo este evento, como tantas alianzas a lo largo del tiempo. Dani, la palabra es tuya, por favor.
Muchas gracias, Fernando. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches a quienes nos acompañan en este espacio, y nuestra gratitud desde siempre para todos los colegas de distintas latitudes que se suman a las iniciativas que hemos tenido desde América Latina para construir estos diálogos transoceánicos, estos diálogos globales, que para nosotros han sido una apuesta desde hace mucho tiempo, pero que no era fácil concretar. Y curiosamente fue en el marco de la pandemia del COVID en 2020 cuando pudimos llevar adelante una experiencia piloto que fue parte de la emergencia que todos transitamos a nivel global, y pudimos establecer estos diálogos virtuales con colegas de todas partes del mundo y dar acceso a nuestros asociados en América Latina, no solamente para que pudieran escuchar, sino también para que pudieran participar e intervenir con sus preguntas por los canales de YouTube. Y eso, que fue un anhelado diálogo durante décadas, finalmente se concretó como una externalidad positiva en el marco de la pandemia. Entonces, a partir de ese momento, desde hace 5 años, estamos generando todas estas instancias de cooperación y de diálogo interinstitucional, porque creemos que esta construcción del pensamiento crítico solamente es posible a partir de un diálogo y de un aprendizaje que sostenemos con otros y otras y que se extiende por fuera de las fronteras de América Latina. Entonces, pensar en los problemas del campo de la comunicación y la cultura y entenderlos también a escala planetaria nos hace posicionarnos de otros modos y también construir el común y construir lazos de solidaridad entre los distintos investigadores e investigadoras que nos congregamos hoy aquí representando nuestras instituciones. Yo solo quisiera recordar, porque somos muchos para hablar, entonces voy a tomar algunos aspectos nada más de nuestra historia. ALAIC tiene una historia de ya 47 años y esa historia ha estado muy ligada a una iniciativa que tuvieron investigadores e investigadoras de América Latina, algunos de ellos eh, en situaciones muy dramáticas de persecución política, fueron los que en primer momento se pudieron vincular y enlazar con representantes de IMCR en su día, en la década del 60, y pudieron a partir de esos primeros encuentros imaginar la posibilidad de que existiera una asociación de similares características a las de IMCR, pero en América Latina. Y ese apoyo que digamos, recibió en su momento desde UNESCO la IMCR para poder ser constituida como tal y para poder ser un espacio de interacción entre investigadores e investigadoras que pudieran dar lugar a la formulación de pensamiento crítico y a la formulación de políticas públicas, también se hizo extensivo a las asociaciones en América Latina. Entonces, nuestra asociación, que como digo tiene ya 47 años de historia, se ha construido también en este diálogo de saberes, en estos espacios de solidaridad internacional y ha representado una fuente de pensamiento crítico y de militancias y acción política en muchos momentos de la historia, porque son nuestros intelectuales, nuestros investigadores quienes han también formulado en su momento las pautas de debate en situaciones cruciales para el campo de la comunicación y la cultura. Son representantes de nuestras asociaciones quienes han participado en los debates por el NOMIC, por ejemplo, en la década del 70, eh, y que han formulado cuestiones claves vinculadas a el derecho a la comunicación. Entonces, consideramos que este espacio de diálogo internacional también aporta una posibilidad de generar igualdad desde la diferencia, que para nosotros es algo importante. Poder tener una plataforma de diálogo conjunta y al mismo tiempo equitativa entre voces y pensamientos y realidades que son muy diferentes, genera esa posibilidad de volvernos iguales desde nuestras diferencias y de aprender de unos y otros. Y para nosotras y nosotros es fundamental que esto se construya y se fortalezca, porque en todas las latitudes eh, experimentamos y vivenciamos cotidianamente el avance de proyectos de derecha y ultraderecha que van socavando las bases que hemos construido largamente en relación al modo de vivir juntos, al modo de construir el común y a las democracias en las que tratamos de sobrevivir a diario. Entonces, este pensamiento crítico es base para poder sostener las democracias, para poder sostener una forma de vida en común en un mundo en donde quepamos y donde haya lugar para todos y todas. Y entendemos que es muy importante tener la posibilidad de construir una voz colectiva e internacional en donde podamos reunirnos y podamos pensar alternativas en conjunto. Solamente decir para finalizar que nuestra asociación ya desde hace muchos años, diría desde el año 2014, lleva adelante un proyecto que consideramos muy interesante, que también lo queremos compartir aquí como una forma de aportar a esta discusión, a esta cooperación, y que son las experiencias de escuelas de verano que hemos construido también en una, digamos, en una continuidad con lo que ya se hacía en Europa, con las escuelas de verano europeas, y consideramos que es un semillero importante para poder construir pensamiento con jóvenes que están iniciando sus carreras y que se están formando. Entonces, para estas nuevas generaciones también nuestra forma de dar continuidad y de dar aporte a la investigación en América Latina es realizar anualmente estas escuelas de verano en distintos lugares de América Latina. Y bueno, ya a la fecha llevamos realizadas 11 escuelas de verano que han sido realmente una de las joyas de ALAIC, uno de los proyectos de los que más nos enorgullecemos, porque también se construye desde una plataforma de solidaridad y trabajo de investigadores e investigadoras latinoamericanos y algunos también de otras latitudes, que suman sus aportes y bueno, ayudan a que los proyectos de los jóvenes investigadores se puedan desarrollar. Por mi parte,
Gracias.
no mucho más, y muchas gracias por este espacio y por este diálogo.
Gracias, Dani. Thank you, Dani. Trying to summarize your presentation to help the people to understand and establish more dialogues. Dani point out the importance of this kind of use of technological tool like these conference rooms, especially from pandemic period in 2020. And Danny told about the construction of critical thinking resulted by this kind of dialogue, building the common with solidarity links. And Danny told about the importance of ALAIC's history with 47 years of activities, not only in academic field, because ALAIC as well, ALAIC, sorry, has developed some political activities, cultural activities, and ALAIC members was very active. For example, the discussions about new week, no, in English, no MIC in Portuguese, the debate about new World Information Communication Order based on UNESCO's commission. And with this kind of activities involving associations, we can create and reinforce equality from difference, building a collective voice. And in the final of the presentation, Dani told about the importance of our summer school. Like has organized 11 editions of summer school, and this summer school, for example, Pili, is a result from the cooperation of ECREA, for example, no? So, Daya Tursu, President of IMCR, please, the floor is yours, and thank you for the comprehension and the participation here.
Thank you so much. And I feel that I should have asked I have two vice presidents. One is Brazilian origin, the other is Spanish. So one of them would have been much better placed to understand the conversation which is going on this very interesting meeting. But I assume somehow that because of the technology we have now, there might be simultaneous translation. But from experience, I can also tell you that it is far from accurate. Sometimes it's absurdly wrong, but so it's better that we don't deal with that. I want to thank both Daniela and Fernando for organizing this and inviting me to be part of this. I'm also very pleased that there is a plan to get something out of it in terms of publication. I think that's very, very important. I was also, I heard IMCR mentioned 3-4 times by Daniela. Of course, the reference now I know was about NAWACO, the New World Information Communication Order, where IMCR had a direct input, very serious input. And as president of this organization, which many of you know is one of the oldest in the world, it was set up in 1957 with 100 plus working groups and sections and nearly 2,800 members, a very diverse organization, 100 countries represented, and a very interesting history in terms of a kind of research and scholarship that it has traditionally followed is more of a critical variety. And I think that tradition continues in IMCR even today, despite all the changes that we have encountered, particularly in the university system as such, the way sort of new liberal ideas have really entrenched themselves into university system. And the younger generation of scholars are almost forced to publish stuff which is, it's often data-driven, lacks that kind of soul and commitment and seriousness and theory, which what an association should be promoting. Now, what distinguishes IMCR from its fellow international association like ICA, and we're very fortunate to have Thomas in the room because ICA, will hear more about it from Thomas. But there's always been this kind of connection between these two organizations. As you would appreciate, they were set up during the height of the Cold War. There was deep politics involved in it. IMCR was more of a European progressive kind of association with a third world orientation, not orientation, but sort of at least acceptance of so-called third world. ICA was, until recent decades, a very American association. And what made IMCR poor in that sense was because it was not as much professional or corporatized as ICA has been from its very inception. Which also means that IMCR has a little more space for that kind of critical discourse and this idea that there should be not vertical communication, but horizontal communication. Brazilians should be talking to the Chinese and the Chinese should be talking to the Africans, etc., which is again at the heart of the NAWACO debate, that there has to be more democratic, more horizontal communication if we really want to have a proper global communication. Now that debate was taking place at a time when the technological ecosystem was very different. So that debate was really about news flow and news agencies. In the age of AI and in the age of 24/7 connectivity, it is so much easier to actually share that communication horizontally. The meeting that you're organizing is a testimony to that. And as was, I think, alluded to earlier, COVID and its aftermath forced us all to get on those screens and talk to people. I, for one, in my position at IMCR chair, I'm doing a lecture online once a fortnight, at least on average, which I would never have done because I wouldn't be able to travel to different countries and there were no resources, time, etc. What I would emphasize is that these kind of conversations should get a slightly higher profile. For example, IMCR has a panel for ICA and ICA has a panel for IMCR, similarly with ACRIA. But having been to these conferences you can see my hair is grown gray for a long time, they don't get the kind of prominence they deserve. And one effort that I want to do, and I've already started doing that at IMCR, some of you may have seen if you were in Singapore conference, I organized a plenary where I invited people from different associations, including Raymond, who is not here. He spoke at that conference, and colleague, from people of the seniority of C.S. Hemlink were there. There was a representation from South Africa. There was a representation from sort of Brazil, come Europe. And it was a fantastic conversation. And what was most heartening for me, as somebody was chairing it and thought about it, it was the graveyard shift. It was the last plenary. And the big hall was almost full, which makes me think that there is interest. If the conversation is of a certain level and certain intensity, and the diversity of that conversation. And I think this kind of meetings, I wish they were happening more frequently at a higher level, and then there's a regular outcome, would actually eventually lead to a much more interesting horizontal communication. I think it's particularly important at a time when there is a huge polarization of conversation, whether it is within nations or internationally. And our role as academics, as people who are involved in international parts of communication, we should, in my view, contribute to lessening that conversation, the bipolarity, to kind of let there be a variety of conversations. And final thing I would say is that technology does provide us a huge potential for making this happen. One of the biggest problems that we all know is the language problem. How do you do a kind of international panel where people understand each other, and the whole debate becomes at a different level. At the moment, it is still skewed in favor of English language. I don't know whether in this room, anyone who has, probably Rennie has English as their first language. All of us are speaking in second or third language. In my case, third language. But it is the language of global communication, and academia is dominated by journals published in English language. So we have to work around it. But the problem is that if we are dependent too much on this technology, there is an inbuilt bias in it, in the sense that it promotes a certain kind of conformism, because machines don't think like humans do. They don't have any sense of aesthetics. They don't have any sense of philosophy. They don't have any sense of ethics. So that is the danger. You could have this great facility, you can translate stuff, but you can also then lead to a very conformist discourse, and which defeats the whole argument of having a transnational conversation on issues which really matter. So once again, thank you for inviting me, and I hope we'll continue this at a slightly higher level, in the sense that all major conferences, we should aim to at least have one panel where you have a discussion on the topic of most relevant in that year, in whatever region we are having those conferences. Thank you.
Thank you, Daya. Intentando resumir un poco de lo que hablaba Daya, él reforzaba el rol de AMCR a lo largo de los años como una institución que sigue teniendo una preocupación con el pensamiento crítico, la comunicación horizontal, la comunicación global, también estimulando generaciones más jóvenes en las acciones que son realizadas. Habló también de la importancia de diálogos a lo largo de los años con entidades como ICA, ¿no? Que tenía una perspectiva más americana y a iniciar europea, algo que de alguna manera está siendo actualizado hoy por hoy. Y Daya habló de la plenaria que el último congreso de a iniciar en Singapur se organizó con diferentes representaciones, con personas de variopintas regiones, tratando de cuestiones sobre la comunicación global, algo que se pone todavía más importante, sobre todo en razón de la polarización actual, y terminó Daya hablando de la importancia de acciones como esta en un mundo con tanta polarización, subrayando las posibilidades tecnológicas que existen hoy y más allá de las dificultades de idioma, hay esta posibilidad de comunicación y también reforzó que las máquinas son importantes, pero de alguna manera están conectadas a un discurso conformista, porque las máquinas no tienen pensamiento ético, estético y filosófico. Y este contacto humano, de alguna manera, puede hacer con que sigamos en diálogo, estimulando Daya que tengamos otras acciones semejantes. Right now, we will have time to listen to you, Thomas. Thank you for your participation here. Thomas is representing ICA in this activity, and the floor is yours, Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to this panel, and thanks for organizing it. I do think that it's timely to explore opportunities for collaboration between our associations, particularly as we are facing similar challenges. Everyone now talks about attacks on academic freedom happening worldwide. I think many international associations are struggling with how to respond to major world events like Gaza. And I think there is a lot we have in common, and there's a lot to talk about. And I will return to that later in a couple of minutes. But before I can do that, I would just like to share a little bit of background connecting to what Daya said about the history of IMCR. ICA, as I'm sure many of you know, is different from ALAIC, ECREA, and IMCR, and several other associations, for it has come out profoundly of an American context. It was originally founded as an association of American scholars, and not even communication scholars. It was more not the kind of communication studies we would think of today, but more a sort of communication in the area of speech communication. And so ICA has come a long way to become more international. It changed its name to the International Communication Association in 1969. And ever since, it has expanded into different parts of the world. But still, my first ICA in 2003, when I got there, that was San Diego, I was one of very few non-American scholars. I was this German guy people pointed to, hey, look, there are Germans, they have this strange dialect when they talk in English, or strange accent. And, it was still heavily dominated by US scholarship. But since then, it has extremely developed into a much more international association. But still, I would say, and that's a critical note from my point of view, is that for a long time, internationalization in ICA was meant to refer to its expansion to Western Europe. So when people said, oh, ICA is so much more international, that was just because we had many Germans, many Dutch scholars, and Scandinavian scholars represented at ICA. If I look at it now, one could say this has substantively changed during the last 20 years. We have more than 5,000 active members from more than 80 countries. There's a lot more participation from East and Southeast Asia that we can see also in our conferences. We deliberately decided to move our conferences out of the Western world. So we are going to meet next year in Cape Town. 2 years later, we are going to meet in Bangkok. So we have intensified our efforts to reach out to scholarly communities way beyond the Western world. And we also did introduce a couple of initiatives that helped us to much better connect to international communities that were traditionally, historically not so well connected to ICA. Several years ago, we developed, or ICA developed, it was way before my time, ICA developed an initiative to create more regional and affiliated conferences. So now every year, ICA also, beyond its annual conference, ICA features regional conferences where ICA is actually heavily involved in terms of budgeting and also reviewing proposals. ICA also provides financial support for these regional conferences. They're not limited to the Western world. In fact, most of those regional conferences are taking place outside of the Western world or outside of the so-called global North. And then we have affiliated conferences. This is a little different from the regional conferences in the sense that ICA does not have so much organizational involvement in these affiliated conferences, but it's still putting its brand on those conferences. So we had a couple of countries, I don't want to mention all of them, but we've been quite active in the last couple of years to have independent conferences in Asia, in Africa, and in other places in the world. And another important new feature of ICA are the so-called regional hubs. We have now 6 regional hubs. So ICA is based in the US, in Washington, DC. So this is our headquarters. We have quite a few people working for ICA in that headquarters. But in addition to that, we do have 6 regional chapters currently in China, France, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria. This selection sounds a little random, but this is because when people approached ICA, we have relatively little leverage about, who gets or who feels attracted to create a regional chapter for ICA. So those regional chapters are organized independently from ICA global headquarters, and membership to those regional chapters is still independent from ICA, but there's of course a lot of overlap between the regional chapters and ICA as an association. And there's a lot of shared activities. So I just talked about regional conferences. Many of these regional conferences are typically organized by regional chapters. So that has been sort of a pilot project in ICA. We started with this about 3 years ago and are currently evaluating our regional chapters with the intention to make this permanent. So, and that is something that's still going on, that we review the distribution of regional chapters for ICA. And we might even have more or fewer. That's still up to discussion within ICA. And then finally, there is another initiative, the last one that I would like to mention here. These are what we call the regional hubs. Regional hubs are sort of time-limited mini conferences that run in parallel or in concurrence with the main ICA conference. The idea behind it is that not everyone in the world does have the money, the time, and so forth to travel to faraway places. And so we give people in certain regions in the world access to the main ICA conference through those regional hubs. The idea actually came out of a time when we all thought about doing virtual conferences during the pandemic. And some of these efforts have worked well, others did not so, but those ICA regional hubs actually came out of ICA thinking about how can we, in a situation where people are restricted in terms of traveling to conferences, how can we cope with that situation? And it worked pretty well, and this is why we continue to have those regional hubs also in future conferences. In 2024, we had 9 hubs. This year, we had 8 hubs, one in China, another one in Egypt, India, Indonesia, Kenya, New Zealand, Nigeria, and Pakistan. So these were the 8 hubs we had this year. And interestingly, and because the impulse or the idea for this meeting came from people, especially based in the Latin American context, all these efforts that ICA has undertaken during the past years, in all of these efforts, the absence of Latin America and the Caribbean is pretty glaring. So we have been not extremely successful in attracting scholarship from Latin America in ICA or attracting scholarship to ICA. I mean, Chile has a large community of scholars in ICA, but it's not necessarily true for other countries in the region. And so far, we had no applications for a regional hub or a regional chapter coming out of South America, for instance, which from the point of view of ICA would actually be advisable to have. Okay, now, well, returning to where we started, as I said, I think it's a wonderful idea to bring together international scholarly associations in the field to think more about how we can collaborate. I've seen relatively few of these collaborations in the past. I've been personally involved in one of them, but it was not an effort that came out of associations, but it was an individual effort. And that was when we did a study on a survey on mental health among media and communication scholars, for which we tried to bring together the major communication associations in the field. Fernando might remember that because Alike participated in that effort. So did ECREA, IAMCR, AAGMC. So we got 4 large communication associations to work on this together. ICA declined, which was a big surprise to myself because I've always considered myself an ICA kid, but ICA was not part of that effort. So this is why I think that collaborations between and across different associations can be most effective if, for instance, focused on one particular tangible topic, like what Daya said, topic most relevant to all of us. So here, the worldwide attacks on academic freedom would immediately come to mind. Here, I see a lot of area where we, as international associations of scholars, actually should collaborate and speak with one voice. Yep, with that, I would leave it here, and thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting, and I look forward to what is coming out of this. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Thomas. Bueno, intentando traducir un poco de lo que hablaba Thomas, él reforzaba la importancia de este tipo de red, sobre todo en este momento de ataques a libertad académica y también a preocupaciones políticas que existen en nivel global, por ejemplo, con la situación en Gaza. Hablaba Thomas un poco de la historia de ICA, de cómo una asociación basada en Estados Unidos a partir de finales de la década de 60, ¿no? En 1969, pasó a ser una institución internacional que se internacionalizó, digamos, con más intensidad, sobre todo en los últimos 20 años, con la participación de personas en otras regiones del mundo, sobre todo de Asia, ¿no? De sur de Asia, habló Thomas de algunos esfuerzos para que eso se intensifique, sobre todo con la creación de capítulos regionales de ICA en China, Francia, India, Indonesia, Kenia y Nigeria, y también de otras 2 acciones, una que es la organización de conferencias regionales con soporte, con el apoyo de ICA, para que la asociación llegue con más intensidad fuera de lo llamado Western World o Global North, ¿no? Del mundo occidental o del norte global. y también de una idea que creo que después incluso podremos hablar un poco más, de hubs regionales, de centros regionales con actividades que están siendo desarrolladas en muchas partes del mundo, pero que todavía no tienen la participación de personas desde América Latina, lo que puede también ser un resultado, digamos, de ese nuestro evento. Y Tomás hablaba de una iniciativa que contó con la participación de las asociaciones, que era relacionada a salud mental y que reunió hace algunos años entidades como a Iniciar, a la IC, en los esfuerzos que se realizaron menos por las asociaciones en sí mismas y más con la participación de investigadores individuales. Bueno, voy a aprovechar que estaba haciendo aquí esta traducción para saludar a las personas que nos acompañan por el chat. I will thank the people from the YouTube's chat participation. Beatriz Marín desde Colombia, Jimena desde Chile, Adirson desde Brasil, Jair, nuestro querido director científico de la IC, desde Colombia, Jenny desde Bolivia, Ilusca desde Brasil, Luis de Fora, reforzando a importância da cooperação, e Anderson, presidente da Socicom, desde Maceió, Brasil. So, Pili, Pruman, Vanderfeld, thank you for your participation and the cooperation in this period, not just involving CREA and AIC, but also involving our universities. And special thanks for the cooperation in terms of our summer school period. The time is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to this discussion. And it's been really intriguing to listen to other people's previous presentations and ideas as to how we can move forward to strengthen these inter-organizational collaborations. So, as a president of ECREA, I have had a pleasure and joy to sort of collaborate with all the organizations that we've had a chance to listen to before. So we've had ALIKE, and we have collaborations with IMCR and ICA, and setting up panels at conference is one of those, I would say, easy, low bar activities that all the organizations can do. So, but how do we make these panels at the conference to be more is definitely a question that Professor Daya raised, and I think we need to take it up in many of these forums. So ECREA is hosting its next conference in less than a year, and you're almost welcome to join us at Brno in Czechia. And as a regional network, because that is what ECREA is. It is a European regional network, and we could argue that in the scope of the global networks, it's small. It's smaller, probably in terms of many other characteristics. It's probably smaller than ALIKE, at least when it comes to territory covered. But it is a question of how the regionality will not stop the potential collaboration issues. So I thought a few things that I would like to sort of invite us thinking about, and Thomas and I have already previously mentioned. It is the academic freedoms. It is the question of how do we do research in these days so that people can be safe, people can be meaningful, and people can be relevant to their respective societies and to their respective societal discussions. And again, one option people might feel is a good one is to distance themselves from the daily politics and say we're doing research for the greater academic goals, but I do think that's just not the right way to go about it. We do need to figure out ways in which we can do research that is directly collaborative with our non-academic partners and meaningful for today's debates. And I think that is probably one of those topics where exchange of knowledge can be very fruitful, and also figuring out how academic freedoms can span out in very many different contexts, because it is very clearly a topic that next career conference will pick up and will have to address. So insights from different global contexts will be definitely relevant, and I'm sure that there is things to share in different ways. Second thing that we definitely need to do is foster inclusive academic communities from the first get-goes. And that's, again, through the summer schools, through spring schools, collaborations that we can do to engage young scholars in as many meaningful discussions as possible, to respect young scholars and also to have grace. I think that's one of those things that we really need to think about. How do we build a kinder, more equitable academic community that takes into account the stark realities that we live in, the lack of job stability, the lack of research funding, the overload of classrooms, the super pressures of either publish or perish, or show up and demonstrate your relevance and impact in different kinds of formats. These troubles, I think, join us all. And how do we not multiply these in our organizations, and how do we find ways in which we can show grace to each other and inclusive collaborative spirit, even if resources are limited? This is something that I'm not sure if I have very good answers, but I think treating people with kindness and treating people with the best ideas of what would I like to be done to me if I would be in that situation is something that we will have to consider more and more. So not thinking about, oh, but when I was young, I could survive harsh criticism, or I could survive rejections, or I could survive 12-hour working days. I think this is exactly the opposite. We need to figure out how can we, starting from our younger colleagues, make space for academia that's livable and enjoyable. And that's my third point that I would like to make in this short time, is to think about how can we make research and research engagements more creative. Can we, and I think media and communications is a really super well positioned place, because we often teach students who will need to be creative in this communication landscape. We train our students to be great masters in that attention economy. So the question is, what can we as scholars do to make our own research more creative, more engaging, and thus hopefully also more relevant to the actors also outside the academia? Does it mean different research methods, different research presentation formats, different ways in spreading knowledge? I think this is something that we need to consider and really take advantage of the digital technologies as mediators rather than thinking tools, because again, as said before, they do not do the thinking for us. So we should really not outsource creativity to AI, but rather embrace that as a sort of core human facility, and hopefully be able to come together around those creative ideas and notions. So I hope to see everyone at those collaborative panels that we can organize at ECREA. I do hope that we can use these collaborative panels to engage in broader dialogues. So when IMCR, ICA and the like are proposing their collaborative panel ideas, do you think about what other than research presentations should be engaging people in those panels? And I promise that Brno conference will be welcoming and inclusive event, even if on paper, primarily for European communication scholars. That was from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for the presentation. Tentando también resumir la presentación de Pil, que habló de la importancia de este intercambio de paneles, digamos, en las conferencias de cada una de las asociaciones, pero también habló de otras cosas más allá de los paneles que se realizan y pueden ser realizados en en los próximos eventos de las asociaciones. Entonces, hablaba Piri de la importancia de la cooperación en términos de libertad académica y también de cómo estimular más redes, en el caso de CREA regionales en Europa. Y también habló ella de cómo crear más cooperación inclusiva en términos de, sobre todo, jóvenes investigadores e investigadoras, y para eso ha desarrollado a lo largo de los años la escuela de verano, escuela de primavera también, para establecer comunidades que se basen en acciones en un espíritu colaborativo e inclusivo, más allá de las limitaciones que existen, y este otro espíritu, digamos, de publish or perish, ¿no? De competencia, de publicación o muerte, digamos, que a veces están presentes en la realidad académica. También habló ella de la importancia de que creemos, estimulemos más espacios de creatividad e engajamiento, ¿no? A partir de diferentes métodos y formatos, lo que también es algo relacionado al espíritu, digamos, de esta nuestra actividad. Bueno, ahora tenemos la ocasión de escuchar una presentación más. Rennie, it's a very pleasure to count on you here. Rennie Barnes from Australia and Aotearoa, I'm not sure if this pronunciation is correct, New Zealand Communication Association. Rennie, the time is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Good evening from Australia, and I will warn you that now is my bedtime, so I hope I make sense. I've written a few notes to keep me on track. We are obviously a regional organization as well. So what I thought I would do is start with a little bit of context about us, about what's happening within our region. I wasn't quite sure if everyone was kind of across that, and then maybe looking at some of those synergies there. I'm the president of the Australia Aotearoa New Zealand Communication Association, and it's quite a privilege to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me. Our region is small in population, yet our communication scholars have a global impact. Australia and New Zealand researchers consistently publish and are cited at world-leading rates. I'd suggest that we're quite well known for critical and interdisciplinary contributions in digital media, journalism, Indigenous and intercultural communication and environmental communication. And I guess we like to think of ourselves as treating communication not just as a skill, but as a vital force for democracy and social justice and innovation. ANZCA members, I think, really do believe that communication matters, but we're up against it in a current environment within our regions. As vibrant and impactful as our sector is, Australian and New Zealand universities face some acute challenges. Many would describe it, I think, as an assault on the humanities and social sciences. In both countries, government policy, funding systems have increasingly directed resources away from our critical disciplines, often justified by claims of job readiness or narrow economic returns. The so-called job-ready graduates reforms in Australia, for example, have led to dramatic fee hikes for humanities and social science students. And this actually disproportionately impacted women, Indigenous and lower socioeconomic students, despite these disciplines enrolling in the greatest number of diverse students. So in Aotearoa, similar issues, funding reforms have also raised questions about sustainability of critical inquiry. and Indigenous knowledge in the institutions. So I guess in that context, it's a reasonably difficult environment for us at the moment. And how does ANZCA respond? I think as an association, we have always fostered pluralism, interdisciplinarity, connecting across with media studies, journalism, digital culture, Indigenous communication, and many other fields. We do support, obviously, rigorous research and international dialogue, but that has tended to be more within Asia Pacific and Americas. But we are really wanting to prioritize reaching beyond and finding those connections. ANZCA, like every organization here, is really built around an annual conference, and that is obviously an important time. We do have a panel at ICA each year, so we do have that outreach there, but we're trying to move beyond being just focused on an annual conference. And I think, like some of the other organizations, we support early and mid career scholars. We are working in various different programs to champion cross-institutional collaboration. Anything really where we're working to advance critical, socially responsible vision, I think, for our discipline. And we're really wanting to look at how we can remain that regional or local, then into the Asia Pacific region, which is so important to us, but then as well to be that globally engaged. We were asked, I guess, tonight to share actions or debates or try and find those synergies. And for me, I guess I thought that maybe some of the synergies between what's happening here within Australia and New Zealand and Latin America would be the consequences of that restructuring and austerity. But of course, all the organizations championing critical inquiry, diversity, which is an important thing that we're looking at both within the organization, but how it's represented within our research, and of course, social purpose. So I guess current debates was something we were asked about. So I think things to think about are how we can organize these research groups or scholarly agendas that can address these challenges, but inclusively, and that's inclusively with all of these organizations who still do need to maintain this local or regional outlook, but a global outlook as well. How can communication advance social justice? Transparency in journalism is something close to my heart, but also that community resilience. How do we develop methods and theories attuned to the local realities, whether that's, I guess, these algorithmic cultures, or is it more regional, localized participation, or Indigenous or multilingual perspectives? I guess in terms of different things that we could do, there's been lots of things that have been brought up here tonight. And I guess what we would be hoping to do and hoping that might emerge from a conversation like this, because I think it's so great that we're involved in this, is this converging, I guess, of our regions and our different approaches to things. And I think we do see that. And maybe there is a way for decentering some of these dominant paradigms, confronting this inequity or digital divides that we see. And certainly for us within our regions, the decolonizing of our field is an important thing. So I guess I just wanted to conclude. I feel like I'm running at time, and I'm a little bit all over the place because it is so late for me. But ANZCA stands for communication and field that's critically engaged, socially committed, but we do want to be globally collaborative. And is there a way that we can do that without being, I guess, just the little region that's doing their thing? How can we connect these differing ideas and differing spaces and challenges that we're facing locally and make those into more of a global conversation? So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Renee, for the presentation and the efforts to establish this bridge involving Australia and New Zealand. Intentando también resumir un poco de lo que hablaba Renny a partir de la experiencia que tiene ella en esta asociación. Hay algunos puntos de conexión entre la realidad de Oceanía y otras partes del mundo, porque hablaba Renny de los cambios en el sistema de financiación de las universidades allá, con restricciones en el presupuesto, y también de la importancia de este tipo de acción de las asociaciones en términos no solo de la academia, como también en propósitos sociales. Y habló ella de que la asociación allá tiene en su agenda algunos retos y temas relacionados, por ejemplo, a justicia social, inclusión, a participación, a comunidades indígenas, a convergencias, también en desigualdades y brechas digitales. También habló René de los esfuerzos en relación a decolonización del campo de la comunicación y de la necesidad que tenemos de conectar diferentes ideas. Y en medio de la presentación, René habló de un panel que organizó la Asociación de Oceanía en ICA. So we have 20 minutes and the people continue to make comments here. And I will thank the participation of Wilson, gracias, Jader, Steven, and the people here in the chat is congratulating us for this moment. Maybe we can divide this time with proposals for the future, no, of this cooperation involving the associations, and dividing maybe 2 or 3 minutes for these summarized ideas for the future and for the final comments from the invited people here. Beginning with you, Daya, is okay?
Sure, thank you.
Please.
This was very, very useful, actually. So I have a very practical suggestion. The IMCR conference next year is in Ireland. So I expect Thomas will come. I expect ECRIA will be represented. I expect people from Australia will come too. It's nice to be in Ireland in summer. It's very pleasant, especially if you like beer. And I could think about organizing a high-profile panel of representatives from major regional organizations. As I said, I started that in Singapore. It was very encouraging, although we could only deal with people who were already there. We didn't have funds to invite people. So since this next conference is in Ireland, I'm expecting there will be a fairly good representation, especially from Europe and US. And I also expect from Latin America. It's not as far to go as Singapore. So that would be my advice, my kind of practical suggestion. And I would expect something similar can be done in other conferences. As I said, we have with ECRIA, with ICA, there is a kind of exchange with Latin American Association, but they become very kind of small scale event. There are 20 people in the room, and they are people who are involved with these associations. The idea is to open it up to a wider discussion, and we pick up a theme which is the most pressing theme. So, for example, mention was made about freedom of academics. Actually, you could argue differently and say the freedom is constrained mostly by what's happening to the political economy of higher education. I mean, I feel very fortunate that I started academia at an age and a time in the UK where you could do what you wanted to do. There was time to think and write. When I think of my younger colleagues, my PhD students, junior faculty, and the pressure they are under to produce stuff is really cruel. And I think, so that might be another argument to say, okay, there is actually a deeper problem. It's not just the universities. It's a problem about how far deep this idea of market has gotten into everything we do. And with the new technologies coming in, especially AI, as I indicated earlier, it could be, the challenge could be even worse. Our jobs might be online in the next 10 years. So we have to really take that into account and have a kind of, a cumulative argument from people from different perspectives And then final thing I'll say, because I'm currently in the Sinosphere, although I'm moving back to London next year, it's a very different discussion in this part of the world on AI. It's utterly uncritical. Is seen as fantastic thing. No discussion about, critical aspects. I mean, I know at least 2 centers in the UK which are called critical AI, and I'm sure there are many more, but not in this part of the world. So that's the other factor to take into account, given the amount of resources the Chinese government is putting out there for younger scholars to join those conferences. And so how do you balance that is again a challenge for all associations, I would say, if you're looking ahead. Thank you.
Ok, Daya. Thank you. Daya hablaba de la importancia de la participación de las asociaciones en la conferencia de iniciar, con más gente participando y con temas que pueden ser incluidos como libertad académica y un pensamiento crítico sobre la inteligencia artificial. Thomas, please.
Thank you. Yeah, if one, I would support Daya's idea for making these joint panels that we have now for a long time between the larger associations to make them really useful. I mean, I'm happy to hear that IMCR is going to meet in, was it Ireland, you say? Yeah, so that's not a long stretch for me. ICA, this in every conference it offers those partner panels for other associations, including ECREA, IMCR. I've moderated one of those sessions at ECREA in Ljubljana some time ago. One thing that we should definitely do, is to give these panels more visibility and also invite people from different associations. So to have them to speak with one or actually diverse voices on one particular issue. So I would definitely support that. We're going to have the next opportunity coming up in early June next year when when ICA meets in Cape Town. So I'm sure in the next couple of weeks you will get IMCR and ECRA will get invitations for partner panels, and we can take that from there. Second, I would like to return to some of the points made by my colleagues here in this panel. I like Pilla's idea of talking more about how to humanize scholarship, how we can be nicer as a scholarly community. That's definitely something we need to talk about. And it's been long on my agenda as in ICA's executive committee. We just launched a new committee on professional academic development that's speaking to those issues. I take the point of AI, which is a big challenge to every one of us. But most importantly, at the moment, the issue that looms, most prominent from my point of view is the issue of attacks on academic freedom and attacks on scholars. Here I see a lot of opportunities to collaborate, for us to speak with one voice, to help our colleagues suffering from attacks. I mean, it makes relatively little sense if we all do this independently, because there's a lot of knowledge we have that I think we should share across our associations. And we should also recognize that the playbook used by those attacking us is very different, or can be very different depending on where you look. So it's different in the US, it's different in Europe, it's different in Africa and many other parts of the world. So we should recognize that difference. And so here I think we could actually leverage the international diversity we have here in this panel towards a collaborative strategy to deal with attacks on academic freedom and attacks on us as scholars. So that would be uh, my personal suggestion to take as the issue as a seed ground for, establishing collaboration across the various associations. There's a lot of potential to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, que hablaba de que está de acuerdo con las ideas presentadas por Daya de aprovechar los espacios dentro de las conferencias, ¿no? Y también ofrecer más visibilidad y, a estas discusiones, incluyendo también un apoyo a la idea de PIL de estimular discusiones sobre cómo humanizar la academia, ¿no? Y también habló Tomás de la importancia de tratar de la inteligencia artificial como un grande reto que tenemos hoy y reforzó en la parte final la necesidad de más discusiones de acciones relacionadas a la libertad académica, reconociendo diferencias que existen y, bueno, con esos peligros alrededor del mundo. Pile, please, it's your time.
Yeah, so I think at the moment I feel like I can endorse the different sort of already proposed ideas, and indeed I absolutely agree with this idea that academia is also being attacked by political economy, by the sort of, again, the more stringent funding conditions, more limited time to do research, limited time to think, limited time to actually really sort of in that pressure where everyone's expected to publish. We also really have given in to the big publishers' agenda, because again, who makes, in addition to all the tech companies, the ones who are making billions of profits are actually publishing companies. So I think how do we discuss, how do we resist, but also how do we take stance on the issues of academic freedoms attacks? There are personal attacks, some people being prosecuted for protesting. There are institutional attacks on subject areas being shut down, on programs being demolished, on funding being cut back, as well as anything in between in terms of systematic reduction of academic freedoms, both in terms of time to think, as well as actually choose to, for instance, not to publish everything that comes out of this world. So I think that coordinating the actions and coordinating the discussions, and perhaps even having a discussion series that sort of moves between the different conferences might be a way to go about it. I think that it might make sense to have a discussion forum also in between conferences. So I think, Fernando, what you guys have done in this particular online panel, you've initiated that coordination opportunity, which I think that it's, at least as my time as president, this is the first opportunity of such to be in an online dialogue with all the other presidents. So I think this is so appreciated and really valuable.
Thank you, Billy, que reforzó esta necesidad de redes y coordinación de las acciones, sobre todo en relación a este momento de la academia bajo presión, no solo política como económica. Y habló Pili incluso de las compañías, ¿no? que publican los trabajos, que no deja de ser un buen tema también para que desarrollemos. Y Pili reforzó también la importancia de este tipo de acciones entre las conferencias, aprovechando estas oportunidades tecnológicas online. So, Renny, could you be the next, please, talking about more proposals and together actions, please?
Sure. I feel like almost coming at the end, it's a similar point of endorsing, I guess, those suggestions from before. So I think on behalf of ANSCA, we obviously really welcome that opportunity, Daya, to have something where we were all brought together in a prominence there. We do have the partner panel at ICA, which is a way to showcase some of the work that's coming out of our region. So along with the other partner panels that Thomas was talking about there, I think Pilay's idea of maybe a discussion series of continuing things, and are there ways then that I feel like perhaps if you can embed that across all of the different conferences, that is a way to bridge the gap between the local, the regional, and the global. Is there a way to continue those across? I was trying to come up, I guess, with some questions that brought together some of the key points that everyone spoke to, and I sort of just made note here of a couple of questions that seemed to gel together across some of the themes that everyone had spoken about. What does it mean to support scholars in precarious environments? I think we all spoke about that in differing kind of contexts and ways. And then if we're looking at steps to move forward, then how can transnational or global partnerships break new ground despite these political and resource constraints? So is there a way maybe that those questions can underpin some of this dialogue series to move forward?
Thanks, Renny. Renny habló de la importancia también de los paneles y las acciones locales, regionales y globales, basadas muy posiblemente en puntos llave, ¿no?, de discusiones, y entre ellos cómo ofrecer soporte a colegas, apoyo, ¿no?, a colegas que están en condiciones precarias. Bueno, todavía tenemos, Laureano y Dani, 5 minutos para compartir antes de cerrar. Capaz, Laureano, podrías hablar, por favor, en inglés o en español o portugués, como quieras, por favor.
Bueno, quiero agradecer mucho esta instancia de cooperación. Creo que salen muy buenas ideas y desde ahí poder repensar el cómo estamos colaborando. Me resultó muy interesante la reflexión de cuando Thomas mencionaba sobre los hubs regionales de ICA y que en América Latina no estaba teniendo lugar. A mí me gustaría verlo desde el vaso medio lleno. Tal vez no se produce eso justamente porque a la IC funciona. Y tal vez el punto de contacto y de mayor cooperación tendría que ser reforzando esas cooperaciones entre asociaciones. Acá tenemos 3 niveles de trabajo. Tenemos el nivel local, tenemos el nivel regional y el internacional. Y me parece que la instancia de poder tener paneles en las conferencias más grandes es muy interesante, pero tal vez hay que repensarlo en términos de que sean los puntos de llegada más que los puntos de partida. Es decir, poder reforzar una colaboración permanente para trabajar estos temas que lleguen a exponerse en esos paneles de alta visibilidad, porque lo que estamos viendo es que tenemos muchas preocupaciones compartidas y desde esa perspectiva tratar de buscar las soluciones conjuntas. Creo que esta instancia, y agradezco muchísimo a la IC el impulso de generar este espacio de diálogo y ojalá que sea el primero de muchos.
Gracias, Laureano. So, Laureano, thanks for this opportunity to be in this panel in the organization of this seminar, and especially for this opportunity to rethinking how how we are collaborating right now, no? And Laureano reinforced the importance of the cooperation involving associations in these 3 levels of cooperation: the local, regional, and global cooperation, suggesting that the panels during the conference arrival point, not necessarily the departure point for the cooperation. In other words, it's important to organize a common, a shared agenda, and after this cooperation, during this cooperation, organizing the panels as the result of the cooperation. And about the Thomas presentation, Laureano reinforced the importance of these hubs in terms of ICA, and told about this interesting fact about Latin America, Thomas, because maybe this absence of activities from ICA in Latin America is consequence of the associations working here, no? And with this, it's important to organize in breeds involving ICA and the Latin American associations. Dani, please.
Sí, muchas gracias y voy a hablar en español, pero bueno, espero que puedan comprenderme. Yo agradezco todas las intervenciones y las propuestas que hemos recibido en el día de hoy y voy a ofrecer una provocación final. Yo al inicio de mi intervención cité que nuestros investigadores latinoamericanos habían participado en las discusiones sobre el NOMIC, sobre el nuevo orden mundial de la información y la comunicación, promovido en la década del 70 por el movimiento de países no alineados al interior de UNESCO. Y yo considero que en este momento, 45 años más tarde, estamos frente a unas condiciones y unas características que reclamarían un nuevo pensamiento respecto de cuál es el nuevo orden mundial de la información y la comunicación frente a un complejo corporativo plataformizado, como lo nombra Tiziana Terranova, frente a los vectorialistas, como lo llama Mackenzie Wark, es decir, cuál es la posición de este nuevo orden planetario y cuál es el papel de las asociaciones de investigadores de comunicación frente a este escenario, qué tenemos para decir, cómo nos manifestamos como actores académico-políticos en el marco de esta nueva reorganización planetaria, donde ya no son solo los estados los que discuten las políticas de comunicación que van a ordenar nuestras vidas, sino que son las corporaciones y en muchos casos actores muy acotados. Y justamente en relación a los desarrollos de IA, sería interesantísimo poder poner en relación las distintas formas de abordar el problema de la inteligencia artificial vinculada al campo de la información y la comunicación en los distintos países, regiones, continentes, porque las respuestas que están dando nuestros países y nuestras regiones son muy diferentes y generan asimetrías profundas en términos de geopolítica. Entonces, propongo en realidad que también como asociaciones podamos darnos un espacio para pensar transversalmente, tal vez de la manera en que pudiéramos coordinar un foro o algo por el estilo, en donde pudiéramos empezar a pensar de una manera paulatina pero sistemática, en qué términos podemos aportar a reflexionar sobre ese nuevo orden que nos interpela, que nos atraviesa y en el marco del cual tenemos que ofrecer respuestas lúcidas y, creo yo, coordinadas y en términos internacionales. Así que esa es mi respuesta, mi provocación final para este encuentro y muchas gracias a todos y todas.
Gracias a vos, Dani. And Daniela told about the importance of this discussion of sort of new order, a new order world order of information and communication right now. Talking about the role of the associations in this context, because currently not just the states, but also and maybe mainly the corporations are dedicated to these actions in terms of communication policies and suggest the creation of a sort of a forum involving the associations to talk and to think and to talk about this new order and other questions like the artificial intelligence. So to finish, I will just read some comments. Great panel with excellent ideas. Tanius Karan from Mexico, our colleague, International Affairs Director of ALAIC. Luciane Agnes, excelente debate iniciativa. Obrigado, Luciane. Maria Eduarda também. Jenny from Bolívia. Lo importante seria armar uma renda para ter os puentes necessários com a Europa, Ásia, Medio Oriente e, em realidade, a nível global, redes incluyentes. Jenny is suggesting an inclusive network involving these discussions here. Maria Eduarda, congratulations for the organization of creating a space where the next steps for Latin American communication in the future can be discussed. Thank you, Maria Eduarda. Pedro, bela iniciativa de debate sobre cooperação acadêmica e científica, trazendo a perspectiva de múltiplas realidades. Vinícius, muito bom estar aqui acompanhando. Em Karina Olarte, pensar e hacer na cooperação acadêmica e científica em nosso campo tem grande valor, sobretudo nas condições do entorno complexo que vivimos. Graças, Karina, por la participação. E também graças, Milton Oliveira, da pré-Amazônia Brasileira no Maranhão. Nosotros invitamos a Ramón Toasson desde Asia Media Information Communication Center, and Margaret Juco desde East Africa Communication Association. Pero os colegas creio que não poderiam participar hoje e seguramente vamos organizar outros eventos também com a participação de colegas de allí. We invited Ramon Toazon from Asia Media Information Communication Center, Margaret Juco from East Africa Communication Association, and maybe we can organize Reni, Daya, Laureano, Thomas, Pili, Dani, other discussions involved these associations as well. And to finish, I would like to thank Gênio Nascimento. Muito obrigado, Gênio, for the support of this session. And we keep in touch, people, organizing more discussions and publications, declarations, taking into account the needs that academic research and academic associations have. See you, people. À la prochaine.
Thank you so much for organizing it. It was a
Thank
great
you.
initiative and we should be
Thank
proud.
you.
Thank you.
Muchas
Nice to
gracias.
meet you
Obrigado.
all and let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Bye. Valeu, Gênio.
Vamos para a próxima. Tem que sair e entrar no link.
Vamos correr lá.